most of the teenagers are within 3 feet of their phone 98% of their life. So anyways, they had this initial bump even on placebo, but you can see it wasn't as great as a group taking azithromycin first. So then the question is, there's a difference between those two patient populations. They do the washout. Those kids who are taking placebo first start taking the azithromycin. And the azithromycin gives them a bump in their FEV1 that's sustained over time. And those groups that had that initial bump in their FEV1 kind of sustain their lung function. Now, the reason this number is lower than this number, and these are the same patients, isn't because their FEV1 declined as soon as they stopped taking azithromycin. It's because they re-zeroed the curve, okay? No one knows how long you should take azithromycin, and that's one of the new debates within the CF community, is how long you should be on it. And this is FVC, which we've talked about before. It's just another measure of lung function. I'm going to skip over it. But essentially, the bottom line is it affected FVC in a positive way as well. So that's the data on anti-inflammatories, and that's why we recommend it. Now, one important thing to note is that the azithromycin is recommended initially in kids who were infected with Pseudomonas. So that's when we tend to talk to you about it. Not positive that should be the only group that's used. So some of your children may have been infected at one point in time with Pseudomonas, haven't grown it in a while, and you're on azithromycin. There are other diseases that are looking at azithromycin to be used for anti-inflammatory properties as well. Speaking off-label, but it doesn't matter because I have no connection to a drug company and I don't work for one. So I work for you all. So we've been through why we do chest therapy, why we do inhaled therapies, why you're on anti-inflammatories. And these are all the basics of care. The next thing is, what's the future? And what's the future of the basics of care? Are biologics the future? And I see Vertex over there somewhere. Yeah, hi. How are you? This is something that I was privileged to work with a physician in Cincinnati who was involved in the initial Vertex trials and continues to be heavily involved in Vertex. And some of you may have met him before or heard his name, J.P. Clancy, who's just a wild man. I was actually going to share a great picture of him dressed up like a leprechaun. But I thought it violated his privacy because I pulled it off Facebook, and I'm his Facebook friend. So, actually, I'm his wife's Facebook friend. He doesn't do Facebook, but so, anyways, this is a really exciting field. It's super exciting. What we're talking about are drugs that can reverse the biologic activity of a defective protein. This is the holy grail of medicine. This is the holy grail of medicine for an MD PhD like myself. Okay, it's been done with some cancers in the past. And the reason I say for an MD PhD like myself, because we look at diseases, we look at the molecular defect. If we can fix a molecular defect, it fixes the disease. That's as clean as it gets, and that's what we want. Kalydeco, which you all know is out there right now, and this is sort of a graph of where it is in its development phase. And I'm sorry, I left off the block for this N6022. Kalydeco is in the patient hands right now. It corrects these class 3 mutants, which are mutations, which are here, and they're gating mutations. So it holds that, the CFTR you can think of as a tube that allows electrolytes to pass through it. And some of those, with the gating mutations, the tube is blocked. And this drug binds to that and opens it and lets it move through. And it is having amazing effects on people who qualify for it. They're having improvement in their FEV1. They're having improvement in their BMIs. And there was a somewhat controversial presentation at the CF conference in 2013 where they saw reversal of bronchiectasis. That's not supposed to happen. So bronchiectasis is a scar, and it stays there. And no one believed it. And the people presenting the data didn't believe it either. They were astounded, and so much so that they had to look at it in several people, and they were finding it. And it was just published, actually, that they're finding reversal of bronchiectasis. Very exciting work. Adalurin. So if you have one of the mutations that's a gating mutation, this is the drug for you. Unfortunately, that's a small percentage of people with cystic fibrosis. Adalurin, this next one, is a read-through drug. This reads through stop codons. So you have DNA that has the gene on it. You have a protein that reads that DNA, and it translates groups of 3 into amino acids, and that's how the protein gets made, and that protein gets transported to the surface. As you're reading along, if you hit something that tells you to stop, don't read anymore, you're done. You don't make any protein. There's no protein on your surface. This Adalurin is a drug that allows that machinery to kind of skip that stop. It's a soft stop, okay? And so you'll get protein, and you'll get protein transported to the surface. These are in phase 3 trials right now. Again, it's a minority of patients with CF, but it's another group of patients with CF. I highly advocate, and this was available to the public, at the last CF meeting, there was a fantastic talk about the details of all of these mutations, where they are in development, and what to expect in the future. The goal of the CF Foundation is to have a molecular pharmaceutical like this for every mutation that exists for CF. And I think they're on their way. It's going to take time, and there's going to be some stumbles along the way. The holy grail is delta F508, right? 87% of the people with CF have delta F508. This trial, VX809 and ivacaftor, and I think the 661 and ivacaftor as well are designed to address delta F508, and they're progressing through as well. I don't have any data on them. I'm not privy to the early data, but the fact that they haven't been abandoned yet means that there aren't safety problems and that there are enough good effects that they think it's worthwhile proceeding with the trial. So there is some hope. However, I want to emphasize all the basics that I discussed need to be in place for these to work. If you don't preserve your lung function in the 5, 10, 15, 20 years it'll take to develop these drugs, you won't have lung function to improve with these drugs. People who are on Kalydeco are still doing all their treatments. So getting the basics is really where it's at. I always hesitate showing this because it may be a little disheartening. I don't see it as that. This is survival curves over time, and these are different therapeutics and when they were developed. And the reason they're spread out over the whole curve is that they're still in existence and still being used. The first description of CF was in 1938. It was a pathologist in Columbia in New York that described it, and she was describing pancreatic problems. In 1953, there was a huge heat wave in New York City, and babies started dying. This Paul D. Santagnis, who worked with Dorothy Anderson, described it, and they figured out these kids were having trouble with salt, and they were diagnosing cystic fibrosis. And then it ran from there. You can see after 1953, when we had the disease, a lot of tools and people were brought to bear, and we're getting new therapies. We're identifying, yes, it's a problem with mucus. Yes, we can interfere with that. Yes, we can get clearance. Yes, we can use antibiotics to treat these patients, and survival started skyrocketing. This is 2005. This is a median predicted age of survival, median. That's a tough word to wrap your brain around if you don't think about it. It means that if you take a group of people, say you have 51 people, the 26th person in that group is 40 years old, okay? So half the people in that group are older than 40. And this was almost 10 years ago. There's every reason in the world to be optimistic with CF. You have a lot of people working for you, and I think there's a lot of progress to be made. That's kind of the end of my show. Not kind of, it is. It says here. Like I said, I left a lot out because of time. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is how I think about CF. So when you talk to me in clinic, I'm always thinking about not only what the evidence shows, but how I can use that to maybe go beyond the evidence a little bit. And I don't say that in a flippant way because I am a scientist. And science for me comes first because that's how I know I'm being safe with patients. But some of the big centers, we talked about the improvements at Cincinnati. And the way they did that was compliance. They looked at who in the center was prescribing the known standard of care therapies. And it would surprise you who wasn't. And I'm speaking about Cincinnati data, not here. Sometimes it was the most seasoned practitioner that had the lowest prescription rate. They weren't doing it on purpose. They weren't doing it because they didn't know. They were doing it because it's a system, right? And so you know what you're supposed to prescribe. You know exactly what you're supposed to prescribe. You prescribe it, but maybe it falls off the list. Or maybe you talk about it and the prescription gets messed up at the pharmacy. Or maybe there's a problem filling it. And the next time you come in, you say, oh, these are all the scripts you're on. So the reason I say that is that if you look at the data from the Cincinnati Improvement Group, and they were in the bottom 10% in the country, and now they're the number 3 center in the country. If you look at the data of how they did it, it was just checks and balances. It was not letting you slide. And when I say letting you, I'm talking about me. So having a piece of paper in front of you where you can check off, yes, I'm doing this. Yes, I'm doing that. Yes, I'm doing that. It was empowering families to say, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be doing that, and getting the information. So part of what we talked about as a group is spending a little more time with families and getting them to understand what we are meaning to do with you, and what you would like from us, and making sure they match up. And so I want you all to feel comfortable talking about that with us, and I hope you do. But there are new faces in the office, and I just want to let you know that both Annie and I both are hoping to sort of go forward with this. So that's it.
Any questions? Raise hands and we'll go for that.
Way in the back.
So say you have a 26-year-old with CF and she's considering adding chest physical therapy to her vest clearance because she's stepped up as much as she can.
Yep.
So with the data you showed, I was kind of wondering, is there anything to show when you lump on another chest clearance that, I mean, obviously everything helps a little bit,
Right.
but it's a lot for her boyfriend
Yeah.
to learn and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And so
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, I'll repeat the question. So the question was, and this is for the people at home, if you're already doing vest, I'm assuming, say there was a 26-year-old hypothetically who's doing vest and was looking to step up therapy, would adding something like manual CPT to the vest help? And I think if you look at I can't pull the paper out of my pocket. I think if you look at the literature, there are papers that say no and yes. And so we just had a discussion with the group in Vermont about what to use for what to use for therapy, period. Like, should we be using a cappella? Should we be using pep mask? Should we be using vest? Should we be using manual CPT? And I think the conclusion of our discussion is there's no strong data to recommend anything. And the most important thing is when you start something, is there a change in how you feel and how much mucus is coming up? So the only way to answer that question for her is to do it and see if she feels better. Knowing that it has a big impact on her life, right? So if it's not a sustainable change, is it a change that's worth making? And are there other things that can go on? So I would advocate like discussing something like a pep mask, or we have families who use the Aerobica, that little device, the acapella device, and run the nebs in through that during a vest, thinking that it'll get further down. There are protocols for using pep vests with a vest. There are other devices like IPV, which we're trying to inch into the care community here. It's hard. It's an expensive device. It's hard to get it in.
Is that the one is that the one that expands?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is a vest vibrates you from without,
Yeah.
right? And it's shake, 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 close, 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 close. And IPV vibrates you from within. It's open, 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 open. We used to use it as fellows on each other, just to learn how it feels and all that. And it's an interesting device because you can get to a point where you'll stop breathing because it breathes for you. So that was our game, but I probably shouldn't say that. Is to try to make each other go apneic with it. But you feel great. You feel great, and you come off of it, and you feel like you did a run. Your lungs are wide open. It's a great device. And if there's anybody in the room, I know CF. So any chronic disease we take care of in medicine, the first thing we do is get people in touch with each other who have the disease. We're crippled in CF because of that. We can't do that, and it's frustrating. And it's frustrating for you. It's frustrating for the providers. Because what I would love to say is, have your daughter go meet somebody else who's using these devices and ask them what they're doing. But I can't make that recommendation. Online, you can, but not in person. So,
Thank
yeah. Yeah.
Colby, you touched a little bit on exercise in your last
Yeah.
answer, but there wasn't a lot in the talk.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about that?
Repeat.
Yeah. The question was, what do I feel about exercise? And so I pulled a bunch of papers on exercise, and I didn't put them in here. I think personally, exercise is a fantastic way to augment, and probably one of the better ways to augment your airway clearance for a couple reasons. And I used to have this debate or discussion with J.P. Clancy. The people who were sustaining the best lung function that we would see were athletes, by and far. And some of the better athletes in the high schools in the area had CF. We used to argue, is it because, are they athletes, is their lung function good because they're athletes, or are they athletes because their lung function is good? And I don't know that, there's data out there to show that your airway clearance is improved. If you exercise your chest wall, your secondary breathing muscles are better. You're getting air down below the mucus and getting it out. It's probably the deepest breathing you ever do is when you're working out. All of that kind of plays into airway clearance. Plus just general conditioning is fantastic. I think exercise is going to be talked about today, but it's one. I didn't go into it because of that, because I didn't want to be shown up, but I would highly advocate. And every patient that I see, activity. You can't go wrong with it. One of the questions I get from some new parents is, do we need to? Can they do sports? Are we going to protect them from sports? We get it with asthmatics as well, right? And the answer is yes, you can do sports. Not only can you, you should do sports. You should get as much activity as possible. It helps you. I think the group with the surfers missed the boat just a hair. I mean, we have hypertonic saline, so I can't criticize them too much, right? But when you surf, I only know this because I started in August, you get beat up. The waves will take you and pin you on the ground and shake you like you've never been shaken before. I get salt water up my nose and stuff comes out of it I didn't know I had. I get thumped in the chest so hard that you have to hold your breath and brace against the wave. It's airway clearance. It's total airway clearance. It's fantastic. So there is surfing in Maine. You need a wetsuit, but it's pretty good actually. But yeah, so I think I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, I think exercise is that, and there's data to support it. That's the other thing. I just didn't show it.
But not that it replaces chest physical therapy.
Correct. The comment was it doesn't replace chest physical therapy. Yes, it's augments it. Yes. Question.
You briefly touched on zinc and the importance of zinc,
Yeah.
and you said there was a study where they did 6 months of supplementation. Was that prior to having zinc added to the daily vitamins?
So,
Repeat.
yeah. So the question was adding zinc in the daily vitamins. Well, the question was, there is zinc deficiency, and there's a study there's a protocol to do 6 month supplementation of zinc. Was that prior to zinc being added to the daily vitamins? I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you that I've had several patients, not here, but in my former job, that were on daily vitamins that had a zinc deficiency because it's about malabsorption, and so we would supplement them more. And we discover it when they come into the hospital with exacerbations, actually, and they just were run down. They were having trouble with their appetite. They just weren't themselves, and who knows. I think it's a fairly benign intervention. We'd put them on zinc. We'd also put them on 4 times a day airway clearance, IV antibiotics, double their hypertonic saline, increase their exercise. But and that's the problem with CF. You don't want to stop doing that stuff, right? So the studies are messy, but yeah. Yes.
In looking at the inflammation process and the prescribing of the ibuprofen
Mhm.
and zithromycin, what is the clinic's thoughts on natural interventions, supplements such as bromelain and curcumin, as an addition to and not replacement of?
Great question. So we don't have an official. Yeah, I'm sorry. The question was natural supplements, natural antioxidants supplementing the care of ibuprofen and azithromycin as an antioxidant. I don't think we have a position on that as a group. So the thing to remember is that 2 of us are new, and we weren't new like, hey, let's sit around for a month and discuss what we're going to do. We're new like, hey, let's start seeing patients right away. And oh, by the way, we don't have time to sit around and talk about what we want to do. So here's my take on supplements. And this is bias, okay? I I dedicated 10 years of my life to doing basic science research. I worked for vaccine companies, so this is where it's filtered through. There is not a good standardized trial for most supplements that I can point at and say, that's what you should do. As I think you got the gist, not all of the trials for the medicines we do recommend are great, okay? There's not money being put into studying the supplements. So I can't say, yes, let's do that. What I can say is that if it's not hurting you, other than financial and adding more care, then what does it hurt? And it may help. We have one family that swears by apple cider vinegar. I haven't seen that since I left New England, but he swears by it, and good for him. I have a stepmother that swears by it too. They're from the same town. But yeah, I think, there's nothing wrong with natural supplementation. Now, if we start talking about inhaled oils and things like that, and I know you're not talking about that, but I've had those questions before because it'll come up with homeopaths, like, oh, I have some essential oils, let's inhale these to cut back on inflammation. I've seen pneumonias from inhaled oils, and they are nasty, and I would not recommend stuff like that. It might not hurt you, but the potential is there for real badness. But some other things that are a little less invasive, if it doesn't hurt, then okay. I would say if you're going to do something like that, do it in a controlled manner. So do the intervention, look for the outcome you're looking for. If you get it, great. If you don't get it, stop, because then it doesn't work. And I'd say that for any of the drugs we use. So
The
yes.
other point that I would make also, we used to have Dr. Matt Hand, who was part of our group, who was double boarded in alternative medicine. And we sent a lot of our CF patients to see him. It was very, very helpful. Unfortunately, Dr. Ham moved down to New Hampshire, but we do have Steve Donnelly, who's another pediatrician in town, who also has a very strong interest in alternative medicine. So I think, as Colby said, it's important that you tell us when you're on these therapies. That's something very important for us to know. They're not all the same. They're not well controlled through the FDA. Some of them could have side effects or problems. But I think for patients that are interested, we have referred them to Dr. Donnelly for evaluation, who is very knowledgeable in these, can give you a lot of patient packets and information. So by all means, we would encourage you to bring that up with us if you're interested.
So just to reiterate for the people at home who may not have heard, and I won't say it as eloquently, we have a homeopath that we refer to,
No, he's a pediatrician.
pediatrician, but
Yeah.
who's trained in alternative medicine,
Yeah.
that we refer to. They can help you make decisions on which ones. Beware of the supply of the drug, which is an important point that I didn't bring up. It's not regulated by the FDA, so the source of what you're getting is super important. And I didn't bring that up. If you're using less reputable sources, sometimes there are things in there you don't want your child to have, or you to have, and that discuss it with us if you're on an alternative, so we can make sure that if there is a change, we know. So.
And I think another very important point is when you start replacing them with therapies that are conventional study therapies that are known to be efficacious, then that's a problem. That's when I get very anxious, is when patients come in and say, I've decided to stop using my enzymes and I'm taking a natural enzyme product instead that is supposed, that gets to be somewhat dangerous. So I think as a supplement, that's something that we talk about, but as far as replacing standardized therapy, I think then you're really kind of getting out on a limb. That can become problematic.
So for the people at home, replacing treatments with studies that support their efficacious with medicines that don't have the same evidence behind them is dangerous. I agree with that.
So what do you think of the new guy?
I look forward to meeting you all.
Just a couple of things. We are going to roll right into the next thing. So if you need a bio break, just very quietly and make sure there's not a huge line or queue, but, do what you need to do, get your coffee or whatever. But we're going to proceed. You may have noticed we were struggling a little bit with sound with our live streaming. What we've done is disconnected actually here, and we're using the laptop sound. So we can go back to using the mobile mic when Ronnie comes up. That should be no problem, but loudness is important. So that's what's been going on there. Everybody doing okay? All right, we haven't had a fire yet, so I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to make it through this event. What I'd like to do is introduce Ronnie Sharpe. Ronnie, I had the chance to see him at a family advisory board event that the Salt Lake City group put on when we were at the national conference in must have been October last year, and I was just really struck by, I don't know, the tone and tenor of this man and his journey and the learnings that he's incorporated into his life and his orientation to CF, and how that affects others and can affect others. So we thought it would be great if we could try to get Ronnie to come up here to Maine and share some of that perspective. So I'm not going to do much more introduction than that, and Ronnie will probably tell you quite a bit about himself. Thanks for coming, Ronnie. We're going to probably mic you up, and then we'll proceed.
We do a sound check. Is that okay? I can talk louder. Probably not. Oh, how's that? No? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you for that introduction. As he kind of alluded to, this whole talk is kind of about me, but I'm hoping that what you get from it is how you can apply it to your own life, and then, of course, in a setting like this, to the lives of your children. And what I'm going to do today is really be very open and honest and share. The talk is mostly me sharing all of my mistakes and all the mistakes that my mom made and all the mistakes that my clinicians made. And then more broad would be the mistakes that the community has made, continues to make, and some mistakes that clinicians still continue to make. And hoping that we can identify what some of those mistakes are. I call them tricks. This talk is entitled CF's Bag of Tricks. I've fallen for them all at one point in time. Like I said, my mom, and I refer to my mom a lot because she was my primary caretaker growing up. My stepdad certainly was around and present, and he did many of my hand pounds because he was a mason, and so throwing bricks around all day, then pounding on me was no big deal. But like I said, I think, and this isn't only isolated to cystic fibrosis. Chronic illnesses, diseases, challenges, whatever you want to label it, come with a lot of tricks and comes with a lot of either identified or diagnosed or felt mental disease that really affects the way that our parents treat us, the decisions that our parents make, the decisions that I made, because of a lifelong fight with cystic fibrosis. And so again, I'm really hoping at the end of this talk, my goal is that when I do these types of things, I'm hoping that one person in the room enjoys one of my sentences and can somehow put that into their lives to make a positive change. And if I can do that for just one of you, then I say mission accomplished. Maybe Mr. Reed would feel differently. But I'm hoping that I can just say something that you can take away. So very briefly, I'm from Arizona, born and raised. Probably the biggest University of Arizona Wildcat fan that you could meet.